I'm a bit of a kid in the candy shop right now, about to interview one of my favourite commentators of all time. Certainly one of the GOATs, that's for sure, in terms of Australian and world sport. But no nerves. Hi folks, today you're in for an absolute treat. We'd be chatting to one of my favourite commentators of all time, Dennis Cometti. Of course, you've heard his voice for many years commentating AFL and the Olympics plus many more sports. We'll find out who you don't want to mess with on the footy field and off the field as well, and find out some of his favourite sporting moments. This plus much more on Legends with Bevo.
Hello, Dennis Cometti here. I'm the I'm the ambassador for National Patio Day for Stratco and enjoying it. They're in conjunction with the Cancer Council. But more importantly, well, not more importantly, they're both equals in this. I want you to look after Bevo with his legends every week. I sort of didn't have the qualifications, but it was a slow week.
Welcome to Legends with Bevo. Thanks to the Holdie, Coopers, and Anytime Fitness Glenelg.
Wow, what a privilege it is today to be chatting to one of my favourite Australian sports commentators, not only in Australia but in the world as well, Dennis Cometti. Great to have you on Legends with Bevo. What a pleasure.
Great to talk with you. In the world. Gee whiz, that's a good start. I haven't had that too often.
Oh, no, you're certainly one of the GOATs, that's for sure.
I was available. That's the thing.
Yes, no, definitely. Hey, before we talk about the National Patio Day, which you're an ambassador for as a part of Stratco and Cancer Council, let's talk about your illustrious career as a commentator, which is still going with Triple M, mind you. But Dennis, there must have been some amazing sporting moments over your time. Perhaps your top three sporting moments as a commentator during your career.
Well, I think a couple of grand finals stand out for me. One was 92 when the West Coast Eagles won their first one. That made the national competition truly national. But a better game was Geelong and Hawthorn in 89 when Ablett got the 9 goals. So they're two special games. In terms of the Olympics, I had the swimming. I was lucky enough to do the swimming, and that was terrific. And I did a lot of cricket as a young man. I called a lot of test match cricket on the ABC. They thought me They thought me a cricket commentator, not a football commentator at that time. So it was rather strange because I'd played some league footy, so I saw myself as more a footy commentator. But I called a lot of games, and a lot of those are memorable too. I remember a couple of great partnerships. Kim Hughes, a couple of innings at the MCG. He was outstanding, I thought. I was close to Kim. Didn't get the best of deals, but he could bat when he was on. I remember one century when it was bouncing there and there at the MCG, and he was quite outstanding against the West Indies, of all people.
Oh, gee, that would have been frightening. Certainly admire people that can stand up to those sort of...
on the bounce, very frightening.
I'd be quite happy to be in the commentary box rather than facing those bounces, that's for sure, Dennis.
So there's a fair bit of sport there, but as I say, the swimmers, Susie O'Neill, Kieran Perkins. So I've been very lucky. You just sometimes luck into it, and I came along at a good time for swimming in Australia, and I knew nothing about swimming, mind you. I just had a pool in the backyard. That was why I was qualified, and I was sent to the Olympics on the back of that.
I was actually going to ask you how you got your first break as a commentator. You played football in the Waffle. Is that sort of how you got your first break as a commentator as well?
No, not really. I started as a disc jockey playing music. I was actually playing football before that. I started when I was pretty young for West Perth, and in my second season, it was going okay, the season. So I got a ring. I'd been trying to get a job in radio. Anyway, they said you had to go and work in the country. Well, I wasn't prepared to do that because I was playing football and I had a job, but I'd rather be on radio. Anyway, because the footy was going pretty well, they were kind enough to offer me a job. So I started doing radio while I was playing football, and I would work nights and then go home, have a sleep and play footy the next day. And what it did actually, it improved my football, I think, because suddenly it's funny, what your next challenge is always takes the weight off a bit from the previous challenge. And so footy worked out well. That was the first break I had. In terms of a commentary break, well, it still concerns radio. I was working for a radio station, 6KY, just a rock station, really. And I got a call from a guy from Melbourne, a fellow called Ian Major. And he was in Perth, and he was broadcasting a carnival. There was a carnival, for the Western Australian team, the South Australian team, and the Victorians. And for some reason, his partner had gone back ill to Victoria, and he thought that station had an affiliation with us. And I told him, well, we weren't really a sports station, we were a rock station. He said, is there anybody there who could call a game of footy? Because we've got the decider tomorrow, Victoria and WA. And I looked around the room and there's nobody there, so I can. So And he fell for it. So I went along the next day and called. That's where I started. So it's been downhill ever since. It was a Victoria versus WA game. South Australia had been eliminated. How'd you laugh? And it was just a wonderful afternoon. And I came out and I was waiting for slaps on the back. But, of course, it only went to Victoria. When I say only went to Victoria, but it was a funny day and a great day. I really enjoyed it. And he was so generous as a broadcaster. The longer it went, the more he let me do.
It's funny you mentioned the country. I actually was a breakfast announcer a couple of years ago on radio, Dennis, and I've done a bit of sports commentating in the swimming and footy, nothing to your level. But what sort of advice do you have for budding commentators out there?
Sometimes it's just a question. Obviously, you have the ability to do those things. And if people want to do it is one thing. They need to have the ability to do it as well. And I've helped a few people along the way, but I sort of don't do a lot of it because then suddenly you feel almost responsible for them. And it's a tough business, the media now. Getting a job is not easy.
If I could be a swimming commentator as good as you, Dennis, or half as good as you, I'd be very happy.
That makes me feel very old. Just talking about special things, I've got something to show you too. See those boots up there? You see the boots?
Yes.
They were sent to me in the mail by Nathan Bassett the week after he took 22 marks in a game that I called at Football Park.
Unreal.
Like Collingwood, they won by 4 points. We're going back now to, I think, the early 90s. Anyway, Bassett was a funny man on and off the field. I didn't know him too well, but that was a great surprise to me that suddenly they turned up in the mail. I looked after him that day, I've got to say, but he was clearly best on ground. And Nathan Bassett, I just loved him. You know, those characters in football, they make the game and they make it easy for broadcasters too, I reckon, if you've got a bit of humour.
Yeah, well said. I totally agree with that one. We don't have enough characters in our game these days. You don't have sort of your Dermies and your Jackos, these sort of people. The game's become a bit too serious. Your thoughts on that as well?
I think you're right to a certain extent, but the media, and I don't want to blame the media because they just go and cover what's there, but at the same time, there's so much media now, isn't there? So I think the players have become more guarded in some respects. They don't take anything for granted when they go out or when they mingle with people because people do the wrong thing with their telephones and what have you. So I think they've almost got a culture now of not wanting to do anything outside the norm. A few of them still do, but even on the field, I think some of them are quite measured now, where before I think they used to sort of give in to what they wanted to do immediately and just respond to things. Now there's a bit of thought goes into it, so it's not spontaneous anymore.
Yeah, that's one of the downsides of social media, isn't it? People can't quite be themselves anymore because they're afraid they're going to get shut down, and obviously having all these mental health issues with different players over the last 5-10 years, which is very sad. Yeah,
it is. It's a tough game to play. And I mean, haven't they done well recently, the players? They did a terrific job, along with the AFL. I mean, I was one person who thought perhaps they wouldn't get through the season.
Yeah.
But they got through with flying colours. Now, there was probably quite a gap between the worst games and the best games, but the best games were good games, and that grand final was a beauty.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. We'll get to that in a moment, because I just want to ask you a bit more about your commentating.
Yeah.
Now, I love the one-liners, you're like a cork in the ocean, centimetre perfect, the list goes on, Dennis. How do you actually come up with those one-liners, though?
Well, the ones you've chosen aren't too good, I don't think. They were just things that, I don't know, they just popped up. But I suppose it comes from being a smart-ass radio commentator is what it comes from, sort of a commentator in the sense of you're playing records. Disc jockey is the word I'm after. So you're expected to do those sort of things, or you were in those days. That was the days of the Rolling Stones and the Beatles. Very exciting time in radio, top 40 radio, and I love doing that. And I worked with some very creative people, disc jockeys who a lot of people around the country would know. Rick Melbourne, there was a fellow called Graham Cherry, who was big in Sydney. Quite a lot of guys who gave me not necessarily any counselling, but I just listened to them and learned quite a bit, sort of about not music so much, but just the way to deliver music on a transistor radio.
And I guess there've been some interesting times in your commentary career, Dennis. So what's been some of your more embarrassing moments, though, in the com box?
Probably my first 3 years. I was lucky because I haven't got too many to think of. I remember a wall fell down once behind me. It sort of fell just alongside me. It just toppled forward. It wasn't a wall. It was just one looked like a wall. It was a piece of cardboard, as a background. But something happened to it, a gust of wind, and suddenly it just fell beside me. Now, it could have been far worse. It would have been a good question yours had you asked me, and it had landed on my head. Because as you can see, I shouldn't say this to you, but I take a great deal of care with my coiffure. You can see that you've always seen that, haven't you?
Yes, exactly. Very envious.
So this thing crashed down anyway, and no one seemed to care, and we just soldiered on.
Beautifully done. And
it's funny, just going back. I don't know how much time we've got, but
plenty of time.
the guys I worked with when I first went to Channel 7 actually were guys I'd worked with in radio. When I was in Perth on a station called 6 p.m, I was doing the nighttime show. This was probably after my best days in football were gone, but I was still a young man. And Sandy Roberts was working in the newsroom. And while I was at the ABC, I shared an office with Drew Morford. So it was quite remarkable. Clinton Gribers came to Perth, but I just missed him by a little bit, probably a decade. But still, it was an interesting office, Perth. Because of the time difference, they got to do so much sport, more than any other state in Australia in terms of their sporting service. They got those extra 2 hours. So you do full days of cricket and things that are unheard of now. And I really think that was a wonderful learning process.
Gee, you mentioned some absolute legends there. Drew Morford, Sandy, and Clinton, obviously a couple of those no longer with us, but some absolute legends there, Dennis.
Yeah, and good fellas too, all of them. I didn't know Clinton that well because there was a gap between myself and Clinton, but at the same time, sharing an office with Drew was very testing. Kept you on your toes. He was a character. Terrific.
I heard he enjoyed a red or two as well.
He did. He was one of a kind and a man who lived life to the full.
Hey, speaking of greats, your dynamic duo with Bruce over the years, we all grew to love that. What was it that made being involved with Bruce in the Combox so special, and perhaps some of your memories with Bruce over the years?
Well, I think in the end it was mutual respect. I don't know what we made of it at the start. I knew of Bruce and he knew of me, I think. And when we got onto the football together, it was interesting because when you get broadcasting with a bloke that you don't know that well for the first time or whatever, everyone's got their own idiosyncrasies. And Bruce has got a few, like he asks a few questions, as everyone reports on the questions he asks. But he would talk about things we'd done together in later years. And I had to ask him if I was there. Like he'd say, remember this, and I've just got a terrible memory. Like this last week I had trouble. Bruce has got a steel trap, and he was perfect to have alongside. Like you just look at him, that was a cue for him to answer a question I may have been asked. He'd jump in. So he was very helpful. Terrific guy, and we've become firm friends over the years, and the girls are friends, and I'm off to Adelaide, hopefully, in a few weeks' time, and I'll certainly look him up. He's a good bloke and a wonderful broadcaster. Yeah,
you certainly put it well there, Dennis. And now let's get to National Patio Day. It's the 5th of December. We've seen your adverts on TV, and obviously you're there.
I've only seen 2. Are they running a few, are they?
The one advert on TV. Obviously, you're the ambassador for Cancer Council and also Stratco. Tell us more about National Patio Day, what it's all about, and how we can get involved in this very important cause, Dennis.
Well, I think the obvious connection here is protection from the sun. I mean, you've got the patio and you've got National Patio Day and the Cancer Council working so hard. The Cancer Council have done a terrific job. Now, how it works, and excuse me for putting on my glasses. I'll read what you're putting up in just a moment. But as I say, the obvious connection there. And we're celebrating on the 5th of December, the Stratco National Patio Day. That's not the start of summer, but very close to it. And last year, the Stratco people, along with National Patio Day and Cancer Council, raised over $250,000. And I think they're going to do better this year. What you do is just register. You can do that. You'll get a free host kit. And as a host, you go into the draw for a $30,000 prize. So it's worth doing, but the patio in the backyard is the thing. And I might even come around a little bit later this year and check it out and do a broadcast from there.
Sounds like a plan. You cannot go wrong.
The glasses. What a plain man.
Like you said, we're certainly getting close to that sort of, well, even at the moment, the weather, actually, it's a bit topsy-turvy. Yesterday in Adelaide, it was 33. Today's 21 with showers. What's it like over there in Perth at the moment? Is it a good day for a patio? Or?
Yeah, good day for a patio last Wednesday. Not so much today. Last Wednesday was the weather you got, obviously, because it was 36 here on the Wednesday. Then it was raining over the weekend, both days. And today is just mild, 22. But I think it's warming up again. So it just feels like summer, doesn't it? There's no footy, so that's immediately something that I sort of learned over the years. No footy, we're going to summer.
Yes, very true.
We're in summer.
And there's the Sheffield Shield cricket, but that's about it. We've got no soccer, no basketball at the moment. How are you coping with only just cricket?
Well, I've got all these apps. I got more apps. So I follow the NFL quite closely, and I like the Premier League a lot. And some of those sites on the internet are just outstanding. So I watch a lot of sport. There's as many games as you can eat, really. I mean, with the NFL, you can watch them all taken down to 40 minutes, which is exceptional because the one thing wrong with the NFL is that the games are too long, aren't they? I find that you go and watch them and it's not as good, the experience, as you would hope. But watching them cut tight in 44 minutes or less sometimes is really terrific. So I sit down and I might watch 10 of those a week.
Hey, not a bad idea.
No social life, as you understand.
Hey, nothing wrong with that at all. You've got to have a love for sport. Hey, and we've got to have a passion for something anyway. Now, you mentioned before about the AFL season. We should just pay credit to the AFL, Gil McLachlan and his team. What a remarkable job they did, Dennis. This pandemic that's struck the world earlier on this year, and thankfully in Australia and particularly Perth and South Australia, we've been pretty fortunate. It hasn't affected us as the eastern states in terms of Victoria. But the actual AFL Grand Final was played at the Gabba, and you mentioned before the Tigers took on the Cats. Great Grand Final, one of the best in recent years. Are Richmond now considered to be one of the best teams of all time, 3 of the last 4 premierships?
I think they've got to be, don't you? I mean, they're right up there. Hawthorn won 3 in a row. What years are we going back to there? Sort of the teens, weren't they? In the teens, 2000 and whatever. And Melbourne won 5 out of 6 going back to the 50s. I had a Melbourne jumper when I was a boy, as a matter of fact, which dates me. I think I was about 8 or 9, and my dad went to Melbourne, came back because he'd watched the footy over there and saw Melbourne, not a grand final, but saw Melbourne because they were Melbourne. He just wanted to go to the MCG and see some of these great players. And so Melbourne is up there as well. But certainly Richmond have positioned themselves to do very much what Melbourne did, if you're sort of breaking it down. Melbourne won, I think, 3 straight, then they lost 1 and then won another 2. So in a roundabout way, Richmond could do much the same thing, win 5 and 6 if they had to. But initially, it's just, as you know, we take it week by week with the footy. And I'm sure their coach is telling them just to simmer down a little bit. And particularly blokes like Cometti, don't listen to him on the telly because that's not going to work. But I think they're in a position certainly to push for greatness. They're probably great now. And they've surprised me along the way. I look at their team, and it's not star-studded, but they've got easily, I think, the best player in the competition. I'm not saying that sort of just because of what happened in the grand final, but he's one of a kind. There aren't many players like him. He reminded me, and it's funny, Lee Matthews voted. He talked about his voting. He got a little strife for the voting, but good man, Lee Matthews, too. But Lee and Dustin Martin, it wasn't by coincidence that Lee gave him the 3 votes, even if he hadn't been the best on the ground, because Lee, it'd be like voting for himself. That's the sort of player he was. He is the closest, Dustin, to Lee Matthews I've ever seen.
Yeah, well, 3 Norm Smiths and a Brownlow already and 3 premierships, and he's still got plenty more years to come as well. He could be right up there with Lee by the time he finishes his career, if not better.
Well, better. I don't know about that. What did Lee win? 9 best and fairest, didn't he?
Yeah, true.
But he didn't win a Brownlow. That's strange. He was the footballer of the century, but not a Brownlow. Isn't that
Maybe he was going around belting too many people, Dennis.
Hey. Well, it's been good talking. I don't want to make an enemy of. He's one man I don't want to make an enemy of. Is Lee Matthews.
No, I'm only joking.
That's unsettling.
I'm only kidding. No, he was tough as they come and an absolute legend, like you mentioned. So yeah.
Great player. I've been lucky to see some great players over the years, and when you look back, you think about it, and you ask yourself sometimes, like with cricket, if you see enough Test matches and what have you, one-day games, you ask yourself, how lucky am I? Sort of looking back, it's a privileged position, the broadcast box.
Yes, it certainly is. I can't say I've got to your level, but hopefully one day when I've retired, I can say I've commentated an AFL game of some sort.
Well, I think we're more than equals now. I think come alongside and move fast.
Hey, I want to speak to you about the hubs as well this year, because it has been a unique season in the AFL, and my team is Port Adelaide, and I was a bit disappointed they lost to Richmond, but they certainly put up a pretty good fight in that game and had a really good season. Credits to Ken Hinkley and his team. But how did you see the hub situation, and was it, do you think the AFL did it pretty well, or what was your thoughts on that?
I thought they did a great job. I think, as I said before, the players were the heroes, I think, the way they sort of applied themselves, because they played a lot of football and quite a few games in a short period of time from time to time as well. So full credit to them. But Gillon McLachlan and everybody at the AFL should be applauded as well, because they did a wonderful job to organise it and make it happen. Now, they had a couple of close brushes. Remember when they first got out of Melbourne, about 3 or 4 hours before the curfew kicked in? They may have had some help there. I don't know. They may have known it was coming. But they didn't look back, and they took the most of that opportunity. And as I say, the game, you said it too, the game was a real good grand final. And that game between Port and Richmond the previous week, I thought was just a terrific game. I'm like you. I'm a bit of a closet Port fan.
Good man.
I do. I admire them, because when I was a boy watching, they came here for an end-of-season trip, and they played... my team had won the premiership here, East Fremantle. I later played for West Perth. I didn't know the difference between East Fremantle and West Perth. Geographically, it's a long way, and as clubs, a long way. This one's up here. No, I didn't mean that. You probably have an audience that might see that. So anyway, they came over and they played an end-of-season game because they'd won one of their many premierships. And I think East Fremantle probably had, at that stage in their team, 4 All-Australians. Unheard of, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
A local team in Perth had 4 All-Australians, and Port beat them.
Wow.
And I think in those days there was a bit on the line for, say, Port and East Fremantle, because WAFL, SANFL, you were trying to say your league was second best, and Port played remarkably well that day. Close game, but I'll never forget that jumper. And they should wear it. They should wear it. They should push the issue with the AFL.
Oh, you'd be a very popular man with Port Adelaide supporters if
well, I've done a few things sort of where I've recorded myself, or they have recorded me, saying that. Now, I think it's a wonderful jumper. And the day that I saw that back on the day, back in the 50s, I just couldn't get it out of my head, because I hadn't seen a jumper like it. See, the Collingwood jumper to me is Swan Districts in Western Australia. Same jumper. I mean, yes. Port have got a variation on it, and they're not allowed to use it. I find that quite remarkable, but I don't want to war with Eddie either. So I'll leave it to discretion. You may want to take that out.
Yeah, so you don't want to get in a war with Eddie, that's for sure. But hopefully they can wear it at least for showdowns, or in the finals, or something like that.
I just run out and do it.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. What's the worst that's going to happen?
well, South Australia will erupt if the AFL tries to do anything, and then just sort of pack your bags and go somewhere else.
That's right, exactly.
You can't. I think it's outrageous that it's the same colours, but it doesn't even come close. It's completely different.
Yeah, I guess Eddie being Eddie, thinking that he...
it's akin to Geelong and North Melbourne having a blue about having the same uniform.
Exactly. They're completely different.
Okay, well, let's move on. There's no trouble there. There's a lot of trouble in what we just did.
There is a lot of trouble, that's right. And you mentioned before the Tigers. I want to get your thoughts on Port, though. Can you see them winning the flag the next few years, Dennis, or do you think they've got still a bit of a way to go?
Well, they looked good in that game against Richmond, I thought. I thought in the first half, had they taken their chances, they could have easily won that game. It was a brutal game. I thought they played very strongly, and it came down almost to luck. Now, things go your way sometimes, don't other times, and they had chances to, just half chances maybe, to win a game that really was important to them. They didn't, but I don't think they lost any supporters at all. I mean, I was hoping they'd win that night, sort of, as I say, soft spot for them. But I thought their application, they couldn't have done much more. It was just the bounce of the football and things that happened, and 1 or 2 acts of brilliance by Richmond players that really hurt them. But no, I think they've got a bright future.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of excitement around Port Adelaide, that's for sure. And in your own teams, obviously West Coast and Freo, West Coast played in the finals, a disappointing loss against the Pies. And Freo actually were one of the real surprise packets this year. Longmuir did a pretty good job, I thought.
I thought they were terrific, yeah. A lot of young players coming through now. It's been about time. Their drafting hasn't been great, but I think in recent years, the last couple of drafts, they've got it right. They need to make the most of having Fife playing there in his prime. So some of those young players that have come in are giving him plenty of help now. I thought Brayshaw was terrific. Chera, I doubted him as a draft choice there for a little while, but he really came on last season. It's amazing when these players who are on ballers get on the ball. Like they weren't getting much time on the ball because they were restricted a little bit by the coaching style of the previous coach. He's a good coach, but I just think he wasn't the best coach to bring on young players, and I think they're in a right space now.
And West Coast, see them being up there again next few years?
I would think so, yeah. But the window is closing, I would think, certainly on, say, Kennedy up forward, and that's going to be a hard man to replace. But they've got the wherewithal and they've shown that they can bounce back. They're pretty resilient, so I would think they'll be around the place. Adelaide's the club you need to get up.
Yeah,
you don't care.
No, I don't care about them. No, that's right. They're the rivals. So
I care. I want Adelaide supporters to know I care. I'd like to see them bounce back. I've got those boots.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. So
what they'll be worth on eBay. And they kick back.
And before I let you go, we could talk all day, but I'm sure you've got better things to do with your time, like watch NFL. But where to from here for Dennis Cometti? You're doing a little bit of stuff with Triple M. What have you got planned going forward?
Well, not much planned. I mean, I'm in the hands of the gods now. I still work for Channel 7, to be honest. I sort of do footy things for them, so that hasn't ceased. But I just didn't want to travel, so I'm still on their books here, but do games for Triple M, which I enjoy. I really enjoyed actually being sort of not at the ground, but sort of in the studio doing this sort of stuff, sort of watching the game. It's easier. They don't go anywhere, really. It's quite simple. I found it better than being at the ground because Optus is a very wide ground, and as an older man, I've got the shakes now. So as a result, I have sort of a bit tricky on the far wing. But no, I sort of am really enjoying life at the moment. It's going well, and things like the Stratco National Patio Day just come along, and they excite me too. They're interesting, and it's all for a good cause. Cancer Council's done a great job, and I talked about the money they raised last year, so good on them, and I look forward to helping them in the near future too. So that's something I can do.
Yeah, very important causes there, well said. And what a pleasure it is to have chatted to you today, Dennis. Well done your amazing career, well done on being involved in National Patio Day, and I look forward to speaking again in the future.
Terrific. It was wonderful to talk with you. Good luck, and good luck to Port.